Hey there. So, let's talk about Predator. So, let's just say it didn't turn out quite as expected. Let's talk about why. The build time this year for BattleBots was extremely low. It was about, from the go-ahead, it was about 5 weeks. And that was to the shipping point. That wasn't to... It wasn't till filming. When filming was 2 more weeks. So, having just moved at that point, I flew in beginning of February. That night I was given a phone call to say, the night I landed, I was given a phone call to say, do you want to be a part of it? And it's not something you turn down. The plan at the time was to run Foxic under a different guise. And in hindsight, I wish I'd done that. Because the faffing around that we did with Foxic, turning Foxic's drive into Predator's drive was such a pain in the ass, and it took so much effort that it wasn't worth it just wasn't worth the time and effort that we put into it. So Predator arrived in LA with Foxic on a pallet, but the chassis of Predator had been built. But that was it, there was nothing else. So we had to take literally everything out of Foxic, the batteries, the speed controllers, the drive motors and the gearboxes and the wheels and put them in a brand new frame. That was the easiest solution that we had at the time. So there was nothing much more we could do. In hindsight, we should have gone for Foxic because when it left the UK it was working. And somewhere in the faffing around, turning up with the new frame and taking everything out, it just didn't work as we'd expected. And yeah, I mean, it was our own demise, really. But that being said, it came out of BattleBots better than it went in. It went in as a shell, not looking like it was going to do anything, and came out as a fully functioning robot. With the exception of the fact that we had to do the opposite. We had to take all of the motors and stuff out of Foxic and put them in Predator. And again, in hindsight, I should have just left it and taken Predator to Robo Games as Foxic and sent Foxic back. That would have been way, way easier. But still, you know, that's not what we did, and mistakes were made. And we let down Predator, really, because I think Predator's a lot better than its record and its fights have shown it to be. It is a very durable robot. When you haven't got to weld the sides on with a stick welder you just bought from Home Depot. Because the Lincoln guys hadn't arrived yet, and we should have just not panicked. And we should have just let the Lincoln guys turn up, and instead we panicked and we made mistakes. Too many to list. But it came out of BattleBots working. So it went on the pallet and eventually came home to me, and it works still. So I haven't really done a great deal to it since. What I have done is I've turned the ears around. That's the most aesthetic thing that you'll see that I've done. And I've switched, because I don't have spare rage bridges, which is what we put in Predator to fix our brushless drive problems that we were having. And they did fix it. They made it work way, way better. However, it was a temporary fix. Because I do prefer having my brushless motors censored, which you can't do on the rage bridges. However, the rage bridges were bulletproof for us, so can't really complain. So yeah, so what I've done so far is I've turned the ears around and I've taken all the paint off. I've put the vests back in and I've reprogrammed them the way that I know that they worked, because that's how they worked before. So that's great. So I've got it going forwards, backwards, left and right. And I'm going to be testing that real shortly. Hydraulics are working, and to bleed a little air out of the system, but they do work. It does self-right, which we've done in another video, but I'll add that in as well. So, what's next for it? Well, I don't think it's going to break anybody's hearts to find out that I don't want to enter it into BattleBots again. I think that's a given at this point, right? I do still kind of like it. I think it's a good robot, but it would be a good showpiece robot. I said when I built it that Predator would be the last theme bot that we make. Then that was principally came because at the time Apex was working and finished top 4 at an event, and you know, with the improvements that we want to make to Apex, it should still be a good live event bot for extreme robots. And we're going to do an original Sin-esque robot for live events as well. So that'll be for Chris to run in the UK. Over here I'm going to run Foxic, principally. I'm going to run the billet version of Foxic. The plan was to run the new version of Foxic in Orlando, but unfortunately I think I'm going to be let down by a supplier of the steel parts, and they are going to, I think they're either going to arrive just after Orlando or right before, and I've spent far too many times throwing robots together last minute and hoping they'll be okay. So now that I've got Predator up together and working, I'm going to focus on finding the little issues in Foxic and fixing them up so that when it goes to Orlando, it runs as expected. So I've got time to do that, and I think that if the new Foxic parts don't arrive in time, then I'm just going to run the old Foxic. But if I can't fix the problems I'm having with Foxic Mark III, I'll just take Predator, because that's the kind of event it'll do reasonably well at. Hydraulics work, it drives forwards, it drives backwards. It's all you can ask for. There are some things I'd like to do to Predator. So the original idea wasn't that it would be what we ended up with. A lot of what we have with Predator is compromise. So we had to compromise on drive, especially. We had to go, we haven't got time to build the newfangled modular gearboxes that we wanted to. We're going to have to build it so that it will take Foxic's gearboxes. And that kind of worked. And, you know, it drives, it goes forwards, backwards, left and right. That's it. But they weren't the drive that it was supposed to have. It's supposed to have a different type of drive. And the hydraulics, wow. So the hydraulics that it's got in it were in our robot TX108 back in the early 2000s. And we changed the pump in about 2005, because it had this teeny tiny little pump that was probably too small for a featherweight. And we changed it from a 3.6 litre a minute pump to a 5 litre a minute pump, and that works. And then we have just changed the motor in this from a 200 watt motor to a 5 kilowatt brushless motor. So we made a big step up there. So originally this was supposed to have a big 22 litre a minute pump. So to have 2 rams, one for the lower jaw, one for the upper jaw. But because of the time scale, we just couldn't get those hydraulic parts together in time. So we had to compromise and run this much older, much more compromised setup. But it does work, and it was a lot simpler to run that than it was to fit a brand new custom built system in. Other people have done it, but trying to coordinate all of that while moving into a house in America, trying to apply for your green card and everything, it was a bit too much, and you probably should have said no, but who says no to BattleBots? I mean, come on. So so what I'd like to do is I'd like to put the newer, bigger, stronger hydraulics in. Had we had the hydraulic system that I wanted in, it'd be much bigger bite, up in excess of about 10 tons. Whereas currently we're about 3-4, which is not enough. That's a good bite. I mean, you'll feel it. It would, it'd go through your leg, but your leg is not as strong as most robots. So the likelihood is that it probably wouldn't have done a great deal had it gotten a good bite on anything, which it didn't do, but you need to prepare. So until I get the new hydraulic system in, which isn't going to be for a while, I'm going to put a spring on the underside of the jaw, to the lower jaw, so that it is constantly pushing it down into the floor. So it should help in getting underneath people. Currently we've just been using it as a lifter. Did that a lot, and it wasn't intended as a lifter. It's a pretty strong lifter, but it wasn't intended as a lifter. So the idea of having the spring means we can keep the lower jaw on the floor so we can get underneath people. Not an overly strong spring, but it's strong enough. And that's about it. Maybe upgrade the Vesks from the Vesk 4s that's currently running to Vesk 6s. Possibly. It's driving, I guess. Let's see how it drives. It's bench test, so let's see how it runs on the floor. Alright, that worked really well. So, one thing I have noticed is that the front right and the rear left are continually spinning, whereas the opposite corners are braking. So these are the masters and these are the slaves. So the slaves aren't braking. So I need to go into the programming and see why that is. Otherwise, it seems to be working quite well. Hydraulics seems to be working super good. I'm quite impressed with it. Otherwise, yeah, superb. I really like it without paint. There's still a bit left, but with the head on, I can't get to them, so I'm going to have to take the head off and carry on. But I'm impressed with that. That worked really well. Took a chunk out of the wall over there. Don't tell the missus. But that was awesome. Yeah. Bring on Orlando.